Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. Your mission today, should you choose to accept it, is to listen to me waffle on, spoiler free, about the new Mission Impossible film, The Final Reckoning. Light the fuse. Hello, welcome back. My name is Paul Mount. If you are new here, if you've just discovered this channel because you're interested in the new Mission Impossible film, why not subscribe to the channel? There's a button there for you to subscribe. You can also like the channel. All this stuff helps the channel thrive and survive. You'll find all sorts of stuff here. Film reviews, classic TV, retro stuff. A lot of retro stuff here if you're into the old genre stuff from the 60s, 70s and 80s. Unboxings, physical media updates, all this sort of stuff. So it's a massively varied channel. So if you are new, if you just discovered me today, then it would be great if you would stick around and get involved. It's a nice, happy little community here. I like to think we don't indulge in too much sniping and snipping. Just people swapping memories and opinions and comments and things without being aggressive and angry, which you find in a lot of other YouTube channels on this platform. So stick around, why don't you? So I'm going to talk about Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, which I saw this morning. Had to go and see it on day one, of course, because I'm a huge fan of this franchise. Although I'm a bit of a Johnny-come-lately because I didn't see the first two films in the cinema. Caught up with them after seeing number 3, which I enjoyed enormously, and then every film since I've really enjoyed as sort of the benchmark of what action films can be in the 21st century. And I'm not a massive fan of the first Brian De Palma film. I think that's quite dated now. John Woo's film, the second entry in the series, is a step in the right direction. But I think it was number 3 onwards that really kicked the series into gear. And they've become bigger and better and more mad since number 3. And Tom Cruise with these death-defying stunts and these extraordinary hoops that he jumps through to bring these incredible sequences to the screen. Tom Cruise to me is the last of the great film stars. You know, he'll go the extra mile to make his entertainment and his films as good as they can possibly be. And he has that sort of feel about him. He has that glow of a superstar. And I know he's a controversial figure and people think he's weird and all that sort of stuff. I don't care about any of that. I just think he makes great films and he's a great ambassador for the art of movie making, this sort of movie making. And with the Mission Impossible films, every film has taken them a little bit further and he's taken more and more risks and done more and more stupid things, which look incredible. Jumping out of planes, hanging off planes. For me, still the best and most incredible stunt in Mission Impossible films in Ghost Protocol when he's hanging from Burj Khalifa for one of these magnetic glove type things. I mean, whoa. Stunt after stunt, you know, diving scenes. It's all there and he does it all himself. So that brings us to The Final Reckoning, which is said to be the final film in the series. I'm not so sure about that. It could go either way. I'm not going to spoil the film, by the way, if you're worried. I'm not going to divulge plot points or talk about characters or what happens or who lives and who dies, any of that sort of stuff. Just going to talk about it in broad terms. I thoroughly enjoyed this film. I thought it was absolutely superb. It was a near perfect follow-up, I think, to Dead Reckoning. Dead Reckoning came out a couple of years ago, or Dead Reckoning Part 1 as it was at the time, because it was planned that Dead Reckoning Part 2 would come out the following year. But I think the writer's strike in America and various other issues forced it to be delayed and rewritten, and it's finally arrived now into its new title of The Final Reckoning. And it does carry on the plot and storyline from the first film, where you will recall a artificial intelligence called the Entity was threatening the security and future of life on Earth. Quite a contemporary and prescient story, really, because AI is in the news all the time. We're always being told that AI is going to do this, it's going to do that. We see examples of it every day of what AI can do. I'm still not decided on whether I think it's a good thing or not, but I suppose it's early days, and I think that this film takes it to the extreme of what could happen. So in a way, it's a cautionary tale about the potential perils of AI taken to an extreme. In the previous film then, we met Ethan and his group, now including Hayley Atwell's Grace, who's a sort of pickpocket who comes on board during the film, as they battle to find out more about the Entity, who controls it, how they can control it, how they can stop it, battling against human liaison Gabriel, played by S.I. Morales, who wants to get the second part of the cruciform key, which will give complete power over the Entity. And the film carries on where the first film with its spectacular ending left off. A lot of people have said about this film that it's quite slow and it's long and there's a lot of exposition. Now I will agree that there's a lot of exposition, there's a lot of stuff being thrown at you in the first hour of this film, but it's never slow, never struck me as boring, because you need to be reminded of what happened in the previous film, and there's certain quite cleverly done expositionary sequences. The first hour and a half also, it busies itself with tying up loose ends from early on in the series, going right back to the first film in the series and indeed the second film in the series. There's lots of Easter eggs, probably quite a few I haven't spotted myself, but there's certainly references and characters and things that are referred to and have agency in this story going forward. Story itself then concerns Ethan and his group desperate to find a way to get to the entity before it spreads right across the world, which it is doing, and it's now just a few days away from gaining control over the nuclear arsenal of every nuclear powered country in the world. They discover that the actual source code for the entity is still buried at the bottom of the Bering Sea, where the Sevastopol Russian submarine sank in 2012. The problem is trying to find out exactly where it sunk. To get there and to move the plot forward, there are not exactly coincidences, but bits of serendipity, happy accidents where they come across bits of information which take them to the next part of the story, and then the next part of the story. They discover that there's this network of sort of monitoring stations across the world that record unusual activity, seismic activity or strange activity around the world, and that leads them to a way to find out exactly where the Sevastopol is, because one of these stations has a record of where it actually sank. The issue, of course, is that the entity is all over the web, it's all over the internet, it's become everything in the internet. How do you contain something like that? How do you stop it? And the way that that is done is by coming up with a bit of kit, which seems like, oh, come on. I think what you have to do with a film like this, and as I said, I think there's a lot of criticism that it's too long, but I didn't find that, because the first hour is really putting all the pieces in place, reminding us of what's gone on before, not just in the previous film, but in previous Mission films, and moving all the pieces forward across the board towards the climax. So it might seem that it's laboured and it takes its time, but I didn't find any of it tedious or boring, because I like these characters. I like spending time with Ethan Hunt and Benji and Grace, Luther, and all these characters from the IMF team. They're familiar people that we have seen in a lot of films now, and they've been through a lot, we've been through a lot with them, and it's good to be back in their company and see them facing up to their greatest threat yet. Into the second hour, the film really moves up a notch when the story is all settled and in place, the plot's moving forward. It's a well-oiled machine. It moves very slickly from plot point to plot point, to story element to story element, moving towards its explosive climax, or potentially explosive climax. Set pieces for Tom are, of course, extraordinary. There's two main set pieces. There's a couple of punch-ups earlier on, but the main two set pieces is the incredibly nerve-wracking underwater dive where he travels down into the Sevastopol. And there's all sorts of issues about decompression and his lungs exploding, and I'm not a huge fan of sort of underwater stuff because it can be murky and hard to work out exactly what's going on. But to be fair, director Christopher McQuarrie, who co-wrote the script, he's really brought this to the screen in a way that makes it easy to follow. You see Ethan making his way through the submarine, getting in, trying to find out where he wants to be to get hold of this source code, all the missiles that are lodged falling on him. It's really well put together, so you're there with him, and it is nerve-wracking and tense because we know what the stakes are. Before he goes in, you know, he understands that potentially he's going to drown, but the others have got to be in exactly the right extraction point to pull him up and resuscitate him. It's all edge of the seat, knife edge stuff, and it's terrific. And then, of course, the set piece, the real set piece, is right at the end of the film, which boils down to two biplanes flying through a narrow ravine, and our boy Tom has jumped onto one of these planes. He's trying to climb up it to get into the pilot's cockpit. He struggles to do that, and he falls off, and he gets back on, and he has to get onto the other plane, and this is Tom doing all this. I know he's wired up and he's all secure, but it's nuts. It's nuts for an action scene in a film, but it is a breathtaking sequence. So in terms of where the plot goes, it really gets very tense and very exciting, because I don't think it's a huge spoiler to say that at one point the entity has control of the internet. And once the entity does get control of the nuclear codes, it's quite clear that it's going to launch an attack. The only way that the American president, who's played by Angela Bassett, returning to the series, can stop it is by launching a preemptive strike on key cities in each of these nuclear territories to try and stop the conflagration taking place via the entity. So she's got a decision to make. Does she sacrifice 100 million innocent people to save 2 billion people or 10 billion people on the earth? It's a difficult choice, and it's done really well because you've got those sequences with her in the command centre with support cast with people like Mark Gatiss and Nick Offerman, and she's moving nearer and nearer making this terrible decision. Meanwhile, Ethan and his team are battling to control the entity and extract it from the internet and somehow subdue and control it. It's a real thrill ride. I wasn't at all disappointed by this film. As somebody who's loved this series for so long, it's always a risk when a series reaches its end that it will go out with a whimper and not a bang. And whilst there's no bang as such in this, the stakes are high, the action is fantastic and terrific and adrenalised, and the performances are absolutely brilliant. I think if I have an issue about the film, I think that perhaps there's less character stuff here. I mean, it's a very high stakes situation, as I've said, the world is at stake, so there's not a lot of time for bantering and jokes and character stuff. But it does feel very by the numbers. The dialogue is very flat. In the previous film, you had lots of really good character stuff with Hayley Atwell as Grace. Here, she's very much second fiddle in the background, really. She doesn't have much character stuff at all. Most of her dialogue is of the, "But Ethan, you'll be killed. Ethan, that's impossible. How do we do this? How do we do that?" It's all to do with all the stuff you get in these films of countdowns and wires being cut and bombs being diffused. It's all that stuff that we've seen again and again in these films, which is great, but it doesn't leave a lot of time for character stuff. Simon Pegg, of course, as Benji Dunn, the technical support. Again, the situation is dire, so there's not as much wisecracking from him as we've had in the past. There's a couple of little wry comments here and there. But the dialogue itself is very much comic strip. You get a lot of stuff of, the entity will be mine. It is your final reckoning. It is that sort of very melodramatic, unrealistic dialogue, I suppose. But then we are in a heightened world of Mission Impossible films where everything's fast-paced and everything's last minute. So I suppose it goes with the territory. But I think I did miss some of the more subtle... I mean, there are a couple of nice bits. I'm not going to spoil certain things. But there are some nice moments that do make you go, whoa, okay, I wasn't expecting that. I'm not going to say who lives or dies or if anybody dies, because you need to watch it to find out for yourself. But I thought it was an extremely satisfying conclusion to the story that started in the last film. As to whether it is the last film as such, it has an ending. There is an ending to the story. There's an ending to the series. But I think moving forward, if there was to be another film in the series, you do think, well, where do we go from here? How do you go from this huge end-of-the-world threat involving a super artificial intelligence? How do you take a step back then to a more routine story about terrorists or espionage or mercenaries, that sort of thing? I suppose the only way would be to go into space, not have aliens, but maybe weapons in space threatening Earth security, something along those lines. You have to be bigger than this. And when you've had a story that threatens the entire world, you sort of boxed yourself into a corner in a way. So I would love to see another Mission Impossible film, because I love this world and I love what Christopher McQuarrie has brought to it. But it does have an ending that makes you think, well, there's a redemption for characters and things. There's a line drawn under things, should we say. But it doesn't close the door necessarily. There could be more, even if it's with different characters, perhaps a different team. I don't know. But at the moment, I do feel that the story is told and that, the circle has been squared. There are connections to earlier films that brings everything to a really nice conclusion. So I really enjoyed this film and I recommend you go and see it immediately. I would give it 9 out of 10. Big 9 out of 10 for Mission Impossible. Final Reckoning. It only loses a point because I do miss that sort of playful character interaction that we had in the last film and some of the other films. But I accept that's because the world is literally at stake here. There's no time for joking around and romances. I mean, for people who don't like sloppy romance stuff, there's none of that here. It just gets on with it. So a great film with a great cast and a fitting end to what's been a superb series of films. And I trust that you will dash off to see it this weekend. And if you do, why not let me know what you thought of it? I'd love to know your thoughts on Mission Impossible, this film particularly, and all the other films, because I think this has been the great action series of the 21st century. And I think it's left things like Bond and Born in the shade, particularly Bond, who is hopefully going to be reinvented by Amazon. I don't know where he goes to compete with this scale of action and drama and adventure that these films have come up with over the years. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you're new here, it'd be great to have you on board for future videos. There's plenty more to come on this channel. Right, it's Wednesday now. My next video is going to be Saturday, so a couple of days off. I got a couple of things on now which keeps you away from the camera, although I have things planned. But the next video will be Saturday night's review of the next Doctor Who episode, Wish World. So have a good fun couple of days. You might want to spend your time trawling back through the back catalogue of videos and seeing what takes your fancy. I will see you soon. Until I do, keep taking the stuff.